I'm just really delighted with this movie. So about a month or so ago, I made a video addressing the many animated works that were going to come out this summer, or at least sometime soon. I've still not caught up to a lot of those works yet, and I've especially been struggling with looking for any theaters that are showing Josie the Tiger and the Fish. But we're not talking about that right now. About a week after posting that video, as I said in a comment that I made, I came across this film, Words Bubble Up Like Soda Pop. And it seems like Netflix has been deliberately hiding this from me since I never heard of this barely advertised movie until their July showcase when this came out of virtually nowhere, though I know that may not be true for some people. After watching the trailer, I absolutely knew that this film would be worth checking out. It looked cute, and it seemed like it would have some pretty neat trope subversions. And then, it was finally released on Netflix, I saw it, and I am thrilled to the max. Like, it's probably my new favorite film of the year. Now, I know that I keep making premature hyperbolic statements claiming certain works as the best, and especially after what happened with Wonder Egg Priority, I don't really want to make the same mistake. But I do still feel the same way about Wolfwalkers being the best film of 2020, and Silent Voice and Violet Evergarden are still in my top favorite animated works of all time. Really, all that I know right now is that I prefer this to Luca, which is saying a lot. Anyway, Words Bubble Up Like Soda Pop is an anime slice-of-life romantic comedy film about the relationship between Yui and Yuki, or Cherry and Smile. Cherry being someone who holds many feelings that he feels is only conveyed effectively through poetry and writing, and Smile being insecure about her buck teeth and braces while also being an influencer online. The story follows them both from their first encounter all the way until Cherry has to move away, and in that time they both get involved with a task to find a record disc for an elderly man named Fujiyama at the day service Cherry works at. Sure, on the surface, it doesn't seem like anything too bombastic or ethereal, and in broad strokes, sure, it does sound like a lot of other similar stories with pretty much the same premise, that being the main boy protagonist who's closed off from outwardly expressing his feelings has his life changed when he meets the quirky, inspirational girl Deuteragonist. However, we've already talked about how simple stories can still be better than most highly detailed epics if their characters and visuals are outstanding enough. I mean, just watch my Luca review if you're still not convinced with that connotation. But Words Bubble Up Like Soda Pop does a lot more than just amazing base character personalities and outstanding visual aesthetic. Even with its simple story and extremely familiar premise, I think why I love it so much is that with that familiar premise comes a load of familiar tropes and details, and what this film does is divert those tropes from the norm just enough to make it feel fresh. Now sure, it doesn't do that for every situation, but it pretty much mostly does that through the entire film. And whenever it's not diverting from standard expectations, it gives enough depth and subtlety to make it still feel fresh and innovative. I already said that Cherry is a sort of deviation of the all too familiar archetype that is the shy, reclusive boy who struggles with making friends and communicating, that more often than not is usually driven by an active dislike towards having friends or being attached to something, except it's not that. The trailer already confirms that Cherry has a sort of communication disorder, which already makes his difficulties in sending, receiving, and processing emotions and social cues very understandable. And he doesn't have an active dislike towards making friends since he actually does have some friends, albeit some extremely quirky ones that he really doesn't feel all that attached to, but he certainly doesn't push them away or disregard everything they do for him, even from the very beginning. He's also shown to be someone good at heart. He doesn't work at the mall or help find the record disc because he has nothing to do and is just throwing himself around. He genuinely wants to help those around him. It's just that he can't really get that across as well as the average person. And later on, it could just be to guarantee an opportunity to spend time with those he considers close to him. And as someone who is neurodivergent, I too get lost in my own world out in public, and I really like it when someone doesn't interrupt my train of thought, since I get very irritated on the inside if someone does. I'm also sensitive to sound, and I know someone who uses headphones to drown out loud noises and sometimes uses them to look like they're listening to music so that people don't talk to them. Gee, I really wish I could do that, but wireless headphones are just not me. And for those wondering, his arc isn't really about him overcoming his communication disorder or getting over any social difficulties, since nothing about the climax has anything to do with the actual crowd. In fact, he still keeps his headphones in haiku interests because those are what ultimately make him feel comfortable. Rather, it's just about him trying to make as many memories as possible, while also trying to express his feelings towards the one person he's the most comfortable around. Speaking of which, there's Yuki, or Smile, the female lead of this movie. In general, she comes across as your typical inspirational pixie girl waifu who's also a quirky, good-hearted soul. And on the surface, sure, that is true, but there is a lot more depth to her than just that. She may follow the patterns of that archetype, but she doesn't shove her kindness in people's faces or relentlessly joke and tease those around her as if that shows how much she cares about them. She's a very easygoing person who is very careful with how she expresses her feelings towards others. And for those wondering, no, I'm not throwing shade at Muge since she also has some depth to her behavior, but I am most definitely throwing shade at a certain someone from I Want to Eat Your Pancreas that the more I think about her character, the more it makes me very irritated. And if anything, her popularity online seems to be an outlet for that sort of in-your-face behavior. But even then, there are people who put on a mask to hide who they really are. She may have this cutesy behavior online and in her first few interactions with Cherry, but she's not really like that. She is very easygoing and thoughtful, like I said, but then there's her insecurities about her buck teeth and braces, which are bad enough to the point where she feels like she needs to put on a literal mask. Also, one of the few times I've seen an anime character with braces, and it's just a very interesting dynamic in general. You have this guy who isn't very in touch with what he feels, but is pretty indifferent with what makes him stand out. But then you put him alongside this easygoing girl who doesn't have as much trouble telling people how she feels, but is insecure about what makes her stand out. Put all of this in a package full of subtle character animation, bubbly backgrounds, and incredible character interactions, and this is one of the most adorable romantic pairings that I've seen in a while. With the exception, of course, being Luce and Amity from The Owl House. I mean, this entire movie just feels like the blushing phase from start to finish. And even in their interactions, as conventionally awkward and cute as they are, their insecurities ultimately make that awkwardness more understandable and in some cases, even relatable. These two are just so perfect together, I could watch them interact with each other all day long. And minor spoilers, while it does suck that we don't see them interact with each other as a couple, it makes up for that by doing literally what I just talked about, having these characters feel fresh and innovative along with their incredibly cute but also very natural dynamic with each other. And they're not the only interesting characters in the movie. Words Bubble Up Like Soda Pop is filled with characters that both feel like actual people and or are fun deviations from their respective archetypes. Cherry's friends consist of a young boy labeled as a troublemaker named Bieber, and an influencer enthusiast named Japan. And while I don't actively dislike these tropes, I do tend to notice some patterns in a lot of characters that derive from these archetypes, mainly the fact that while they are very likable, in general they are objectively not really great people, at least until they go through some internal character arc. However, for these two, it is quite the opposite. While one is causing a lot of trouble and the other is being a little too friendly with those around him, both of them are really good people at heart. Bieber does spray paint Cherry's haikus all around town, but his primary reason for doing that is to better learn Japanese since he comes from abroad. and while Japan is very vocal about his special interests, he knows his limits enough to not look like some kind of creep, which makes his interactions with Smile all the more refreshing. Also, this guy that's literally named Tough Guy, who looks like your typical bully character but manages to be a cinnamon roll the whole way through while keeping his mean person persona. Both Cherry and Smile's families are just the right combination of relatable and very refreshing. There was never once a moment when I thought Smile's sisters were jerks. Both of their parents were very caring of their respective child, and the married couple banter is actually pretty funny. Also, the no phones at the table gag made me laugh so hard, and I do not know why. Cherry's co-workers are very easygoing and just the right amount of different from each other to make themselves look interesting. And Fujiyama is another good-hearted soul who is very wise and knowledgeable and is able to communicate his words of wisdom in both a down-to-earth way and an in-your-face way. That by literally screaming. Have I mentioned that the dialogue is so much fun too? Moving back to Cherry and Smile, I already talked about how their relationship is super cute, but also very genuine feeling with a fun and interesting dynamic, and how a lot of that is due to clever writing and trope subversions, but it is also because of the art and the animation. I'll go ahead and say this right now, this movie looks amazing. Having this simple, bubbly, color-saturated art style to fit the tone is absolutely a plus. The backgrounds have this incredible childhood whimsy feel to them, and the character designs are pretty self-explanatory, very cute and appealing. At times it can be a bit too bold and colorful, but I digress. But the big talking point about its visuals that I want to address is how it subtly depicts the relationship between these characters. Cherry and Smile have a pretty great relationship already in its writing, but there are a lot of subtle details in the visuals, particularly with personal space and where they are looking. During their first encounter, Cherry moves closer to Smile, signifying them going from mere acquaintances to friends, and later to close friends, and much later to something more intimate than that, though not officially dating. And also a lot of leg shots, which makes my mind immediately go to Naoko Yamada. Not only is this KyoAni levels of subtlety, but it is very reminiscent of her style. That may be hyperbole, but it really is deserving of that kind of high praise. I really do mean it when I say that this film looks incredible. Also, its soundtrack is straight up amazing. It's a bop. However, I know that no matter how much I praise this film, it does have its flaws and some negative points that will certainly make it look underwhelming. But for the criticisms I've seen so far, I do have my defenses, though I also have my issues with the film, which I'll get to in just a little bit. I just brought this up last time when talking about Luca, but people like to criticize a film for being unambitious and small-scaled in premise. If you want further thoughts, go watch my Luca review, but in short, a lot of the time, you don't need a complex narrative to make a film feel exciting. Sometimes it just takes the characters and the technicalities to make a simple story feel like a bombastic epic. Which brings me to the other potential point of criticism, that there isn't really a strong connection between Fujiyama and Cherry or Smile. While I do somewhat agree with that connotation, I don't think it should be a serious mark against the film. Him being unrelated to both of them only makes their actions of kindness all the more appealing, showing how good-hearted they are. And even if he was, I think this criticism would just be replaced by, ooh, they only helped him because they're related to him, it's not because they're 100% good. There's also the point that some people wish that there could have been a discussion point in the film to explain why they both considered their relationship to be so important. I also kind of belong in this camp, but I do want to call back to what I said before about their dynamic. Cherry helps Smile to be comfortable with what makes her unique from others, that being her buck teeth and braces, and Smile helps Cherry to be comfortable with expressing his feelings however he wants to. Also, spoiler warning, skip to this timestamp. I understand if people who connect to Cherry more than Smile see their misunderstanding leading to that rift in their relationship being somewhat forced, especially on Smile's side, which I wouldn't argue with that point if it wasn't immediately followed by the most heartbreaking scene in the movie, which I may talk about at a different time. I do agree that this could have been handled a little bit better, but it's way better than nothing and still leagues better than half of something. Despite all this, it doesn't change the fact that this film is so watchable and undeniably cute. But I do know that there will be some people who generally won't enjoy it as much as I did, whether if the negatives bothered them just enough, or if they aren't really into cute things even though this film isn't really derivative of moe, or maybe they just don't see the subtle differences between this and other anime romantic comedies, ergo they feel like that this movie is just nothing that special. Well, there is nothing I can do about that. At the end of the day, I just really love this movie. I may have liked the filmmaking and character dynamics in Luca, but I love everything about Words Bubble Up Like Soda Pop. From its visuals to its characters to its soundtrack, it takes a lot of the typical tropes of a romantic comedy and optimizes them just enough to make them feel refreshing. And in spite of the few flaws, it's just really cute. I also think that this has some of the best characters of this year, not just in their arcs, but mainly just due to their base personalities. Like I said, it is a lot of fun to just watch them have conversations. I will say that I am even more unsure of rating this film than I was with Luca, that being whether or not I should give it an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, but currently it doesn't matter because I love this film to bits. Right now, I just want to say, in my humble opinion, it is one of, if not the best animated film of 2021 so far. And you really should check it out on Netflix. And if you have already watched Words Bubble Up Like Soda Pop, let me know your thoughts on it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It takes hours and days to make these videos, whereas it only takes a few seconds of your time to do those 4 actions. As always, thank you for watching, and see you next time.